you have the obligation to provide the kid sufficient care, protection, training, so that he can carry on for himself.
And just to state my point very clearly, now that you've both responded, it seems to me that under libertarianism, the idea that coercion is bad. You're trying to derive things. You can't derive from the principle of avoiding coercion, but you can derive from other principles which are largely inarticulate.
No.
In other words, I'm not hearing people distinguish.
Okay, what I am saying is that if a parent brings a kid into existence, and then the effect is you have to provide the kid with the means to carry on by himself.
It's like a contract argument. You basically have an obligation.
No, not a contract. Because what I am arguing is, and we'll use the extreme case of the infant.
Yeah.
If you leave the infant on the church steps and the infant dies, your control of that infant is so total, so absolute, you killed him. Mm-hmm. That's to cause to die in the very narrow sense of cause. Your power over that kid is so total and absolute that it's not like you didn't buy from somebody so they went out of business. Now, there's also a corollary thing. If you have taken the kid and put him into a situation where you refuse to give him the tools to survive, it's not as extreme, but it works out to the same thing in principle. So I would say that the avoidance...
How? Can you articulate that? I don't understand.
Because who caused the situation? I'm going to go back and ask that question. And I would argue it just as a matter of fact, again, the extreme case is easy. The infant on the church steps. They caused it. They killed. They didn't let die. It's not like the derelict they didn't give money to. They killed. It works out to the same thing. The fact is the causation is so total, the control is so absolute.
I still maintain that you're distinguishing between...
I think this is argument. I think you should let
one
or two more people get a question in, okay?
Walter, I'd like your comments on the Baby M case in light of your homesteading principle. That is, does the mother have an absolute homesteading right, or can this be apportioned out by contract? And secondly, how does contract apply in this situation if you accept the Evers-Rothbard title transfer contract theory, which would suggest that the mother has some type of inalienable will, which she perhaps can exercise if there has not been a title transfer?
I disagree with Murray on the voluntary slavery issue, which seems to be reminiscent of this question of alienating the will. I believe that in libertarian theory, you should have the right to sell yourself into slavery. Murray's answer is that the will is inalienable. My answer to that is, what's being sold into slavery cannot therefore be the inalienable will, but the body and the rights to the body. In other words, suppose my child is dying of something and I need $1 million for his operation, and you'll give me $1 million if I come and be your slave. Okay, so you give me the $1 million, I give it to save my kid's life, and now I come and be your slave. Now, suppose I try to run away. I think that I'm stealing a valuable piece of a valuable piece of your property, namely me. Okay? It's true, it's logically impossible to alienate my will. You can't make me want to be your slave, but the righteous act is to have a runaway slave act, like we did in the Civil War period. Only there it was for coercive slaves, which I'm not in favor of returning to their rightful owners, because they don't have rightful owners except themselves. But in the case of voluntary slavery, if I try to run away and someone else sees me, they should capture me and give me back to you. So it's not the will, it's the body, the bod.
So your conclusion would be that this Baby M case was correctly decided, and that a surrogate mother does not have a right to change her mind after she's entered into a contractual relationship.
Oh, you're darn tootin'. Yes, I think one of the few cases that the state courts have decided right, yes, to uphold that contract. While I've got the monopoly of the microphone for a second, I just wanted to reply to the to 2 points that were made before. One about kids not being intermediate between adults and animals that can be owned, because kids are fully human beings from day one. Well, if kids are fully human beings from day one, not only don't I have a right to spank them, but I can't even insist that they brush their teeth or go to bed. Michael Edelstein was a guest in my house the last week. Wouldn't it have been strange if I insisted that he brush his teeth and that he go to bed and that he eat this food and not that food? I mean, it would have been seen as ludicrous. My children are not full. I don't know, maybe people who say that don't have children, but children aren't really fully adult or fully human. They're little animals, like, they do all sorts of weird things. You have to train them, and I think part of caring for them is training for them. So certainly if we're going to consider them as adults, we have to treat them as adults. We can't insist that they clean their rooms or anything. Now, I didn't go down to Michael's room and insist that he clean it, I suppose I could have, but he's real slob. The second point about cause to die, I think that if you allow the bum, okay, there's a bum. He's right there, he's starving. You have it within your power to feed him. If you don't, I think you're causing him to die in the same way that you're causing to die a newborn who you abandon. The question is not whether you're causing anything. The question is if you're violating their rights. Now look, suppose a woman is a victim of a rape, and either she evicts the fetus before it gets born, or it gets born and it's a newborn and she just abandons it. I think the position, that newborn is just as helpless as the bum. They're equally helpless. They're equally dependent upon her. She's got no responsibility for either of them. It's true she had one in her for 9 months, but it wasn't based on her doing. She was raped. So as far as causation is concerned, the baby and the bum are equally in the same position.
Well, why don't we get one more question in here and then we close? Because I can see people looking unhappily at us from the door.
First, a comment on the businessman analogy. The customer had no obligation to buy from the businessman, and the competing businessman had no obligation not to compete. So if the other businessman goes out of business, it's not through anybody else's fault, but perhaps his own. So I think that's a bad analogy. On the question of the distinction between the woman who conceives as a result of rape and the woman who voluntarily has sex, I think you're not making the distinction between whether whether you cause the bum to be a bum, or whether you cause that child to be in need of care. You're acting as if it's irrelevant to whether you caused the need for care in the first place, whether you didn't cause the need for care in the first place. You're saying that giving to your own child, feeding your own child, is like a case of charity. If you feed a stranger's child who's hungry, that's charity. If you feed your own child, it's no different. It must be charity. And I don't understand. You haven't made the distinction clear why it's irrelevant. The facts of the matter that you caused the need in the first place. Can you?
I don't think cause is a libertarian concern.
Why?
I think that libertarianism is a study in normative. It's a normative science. Causation is an element in positive science. I think it's a category mistake to conflate causation and rights violations. Libertarians are not, as far as I'm concerned, involved with positive causality. They're only concerned with normative rights violations. Now, it's true that the mother, the rape victim, caused this baby to be in existence in some physical sense. I mean, you go to biology and you learn, this is what happens, intercourse takes place, whether it's rape or not. Yes, if you abstract from the libertarian element, namely coercion or voluntariness, you can say, yes, both the woman who gave birth to a voluntary child and the woman who gave birth to a rape result child equally caused the baby to exist. And if you say that, you miss out on the entire libertarian element, the libertarian perspective, which has got not one whit to do with cause, but 100% to do with rights violations. If you see the woman who was raped and the woman who was not raped as morally equally or libertarianly equally, you're missing out on what the essential element of libertarianism is all about.
Walter, wait a minute. Are you saying that the woman who conceives as a result result of rape is equally morally a cause of the child's existence as a woman who voluntarily has sex?
Look, the concept morally a cause is a contradiction in terms. There are two different universes out there.
Did her actions lead to the fact of the child's existence when she was raped?
Yes, her actions.
Walter, let's give John a chance to respond too, because we really have to cut this off.
I'm afraid that what Dr. Block is saying is that facts don't have anything to do with libertarianism. And the point I'm simply making is that go back to his thing of the kidneys, the man that's hooked into you. If you had taken out his kidneys and then somebody else or however had been plugged into you, that's totally different from the case of he just got randomly plugged into you. Because it's the fact that you caused that situation. And so if the bum, if the derelict, if you've been sneaking up and putting, something in his veins to turn him squashy in the brain, then you caused it, then yes. So that this notion of causation certainly may not have anything to do, so to speak, with the abstract principle of thou shalt not aggress, but when you decide to do something, what are we going to say? If I hit somebody on the street, well, that is merely a matter of causality. That doesn't have anything to do with the libertarian theory of rights, and so therefore I have no obligations to this clown. Sorry, you caused it, you pay for it. And in the same sense, if you abandon the kid is dead, you killed him. That's the fact.
I'd like to thank both of our speakers, and I hope this has been as thought-provoking for you as it has been for me. Thank you.
Let's hope that the next panel merely evicts us and not aborts us.
Well, this was late, sir.
Yes.